Welcome back, baseball fans, to another edition of the Prep Baseball Report of North Carolina podcast. I'm Brandon Hall, the Mid-Atlantic Director of Scouting for PBR. He's Matt Payne, our North Carolina Director of Scouting. Going to talk about all the action going on across high school baseball. Plus, we're getting into our summer, scout days, open events, leading into the future games, North Carolina-South Carolina border battle, and much, much more. Matt, how we doing?
Doing good. How about you?
Good. We got a bunch of stuff going on around the house today, so I'm hoping that the noise doesn't get into the room too much. And then little man's already out for the summer, so don't be shocked if he just barges in here at some point, and we'll just roll with it because I'm probably not going to edit that out. But a big day today. We've got our first Team Carolina trials tonight as we're filming this on Wednesday and posting on Thursday. I think we've got close to 40 players. A lot of those guys are still in school, so it's kind of a weird date, but it does allow us to get a jump on seeing some guys that may represent Team Carolina in the North Carolina-South Carolina border battle, or future games, or top prospect games, or some of those bigger events we have coming down the line.
Yeah, those events have been good to us as far as getting players for Team Carolina, and then guys update numbers and our border battle and top prospect games, and they've been good events in the past, and looking forward to the roster we have tonight.
Yeah, big one tonight, and this weekend we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scout days. So really excited about those scout days as well. Chance to see a lot of good players across North Carolina, but as we're talking about that, a lot of good players from North Carolina kept their seasons alive. College baseball works itself into a regionals, 64 teams paired up in 16 regionals. I know you and Sammy Esposito in South Carolina sat down and I think went bracket by bracket making some picks on the South Carolina podcast. So if you want to see that, you can find that on YouTube. But what were your overall impressions on some of the things that came out of the regionals as they were posted?
ACC, SEC baseball. The SEC getting 8 hosts. I believe the ACC had 4. Once again, they lead with a number of teams in. And then the Columbia Regional with NC State and Campbell down there. I think it's got a chance to be big. And then Wake Forest, the year they had, getting the number 1 overall seed, very deserving of that.
Yeah, I think we had 8 from North Carolina, which is a new record for the state. Within the Carolinas, we had Wake, Coastal, South Carolina, Clemson. Was that the 4 host? So quarter of the host. Was there another one?
Coastal, Clemson, South Carolina, 3 and host in South Carolina.
Yeah, so 4 in the Carolinas, a quarter of the coasting sites in North and South Carolina. The other big takeaway for me, and I know we're seeing the coach at Kansas State, we're seeing some other coaches, UC Irvine, and they're hemming and hawing on the RPI, and I get that out there's at times where they can't schedule, and so UCI tried to schedule, they really did, and they had some teams lose in the last 2 weeks where if they had just played 500, those teams they had played against had just played 500. Those end up being quad 1 wins. Instead, they drop out of the top 50. They're barely quad 2 wins just because they're on the road. And that hurts, and you can't predict that. But I thought the bubble was so soft this year. I didn't think there was any deserving team that looks up and goes, man, I can't believe we didn't get in. Whereas you see that, last year I thought NC State was a deserving team and didn't get in. I don't think the committee made. Now there's teams you can make arguments for. This team should have been in over that team, but there's teams in this tournament that in years past would not have sniffed it. I just thought the bubble was extremely weak. I think the higher end of the brackets, the higher end of the host sites, and the 1s and 2 seeds are much, much stronger than the 3s, the 4s, and the guys left out.
Yeah, the bubble was definitely weak this year. Glad to see State get back in, but from coaching and scheduling, coaches try to factor in RPI when they schedule and do the best they can and with the non-conference. But when you play, when your league's tough, like take the Sun Belt, a good league, you got to be careful what you do non-conference because you got to try to make sure you get some wins in there and don't kill your team early. And scheduling is definitely a tricky part of college baseball that probably a lot of people don't realize how much goes into it.
Yeah, I mean, when I was at Charlotte and we were in the Atlantic 10, we had some leeway with midweek games. I know Campbell has done this at times in the past where you can hold a weekend guy for a midweek. knowing that your 4 is going to be fine on Sunday, or your 2 is going to be fine on Friday against whoever you're playing, and you can hold your 1 back, or you could slough off a little bit. The other thing that happens when you're in some of those weaker leagues is you can really plan your bullpen out. You get into some blowout games, you get into some games where you're up 4, 5, 6 runs on Saturday and Sunday, and so you're not pitching guys in tight leverage. You can throw them 30 pitches, 30 pitches, 30 pitches, go to the next guy. As long as we're throwing strikes, we're going to be fine. And then you roll out there on Tuesday or Wednesday, and you've got 12 to 13 arms that you can throw at whoever you're playing. And as soon as one guy doesn't have it, boom, we go to the next arm. You don't ever have to have a guy kind of sift through it and work through it because your bullpen's been shortened. Whereas being in a strong conference, you mentioned the Sun Belt, obviously the SEC, the ACC, at times the American, at times a Conference USA. You may be in battles for 3 straight days. And Tuesday, you may just limp in with pitching on Tuesday. You have your Tuesday starter. He's set and ready to go. He's fine. But that ability to mix and match and set up for the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, and 9th innings isn't there. And all that affects RPI. All that affects it. And, we try to manipulate, we try to plan, we try to schedule. Here's how we're going to attack the RPI. But there's so many different factors that play into it. I don't know if there's a mathematical formula where you say, okay, this works for baseball outside of, some of the eye test. And I honestly think I would love to see them kind of go back to a little bit more of a regional format, and maybe certain regions are getting more teams in. I know Division II does this, but I don't think Division II has it right either, because I don't think the Southeast gets enough teams in, because there are a lot more, there are really, really good teams left out. When if you go to the Northeast and take one of those teams left out and put them in the Northeast Regional, they would be picked to win that regional. That's not necessarily right either.
No, it's not. And, baseball is very strong in the Southeast, and you get into some of those mid-majors there that may finish on the top half of, say, a Big Ten conference or something like that. But, you got to factor in budget too, and they also have to get a certain number of home games to keep their administration happy, so that, they may want to go play an SEC school midweek or somebody else midweek, but they just doesn't work out budget-wise or with their administration and things like that. So it's tough, and there's definitely teams that probably get hosed on some of that. I did, it is nice to see Coastal, a Sun Belt team, hosting, and then another Louisiana get in, and Campbell, with the year they had, they were right there with a host, and they just it's hard for those schools to host that are in smaller conferences at times.
That was another take I had away with. The 15 of the top 16 RPIs are hosting. We're leaning really heavily on that. But the one that doesn't get the host is the mid-major that's won 2 championships. They won their regular season, they won their bid, and they get bumped by a team at 19 whose AD is the committee chair. Now, when they've been bumped for Auburn, and maybe, I don't think Auburn was the school that necessarily had to jump, but I was shocked to see Auburn jumping Alabama and South Carolina and Campbell. I think it would have been great. Now, you get in some other logistics too. You put a 5th regional host in the Carolinas, it does create some travel issue. And I know the NCAA, the committee is going to tell you they don't think about that. They absolutely think about that. You're seeing the debacle that's happening in Kentucky right now. I can't imagine that the committee did not know that they weren't going to have hotels, that they were going to be staying in dorms. But that's part of that SEC. They're going to bring in money. They have some TV draw. They have some TV power, and that regional should be in West Virginia. Kentucky can still be the one, but go play at West Virginia. If we're going to do that, there were some things that I would like to see changed, kind of within in that structure, and seeing some of the power, because it happens every year. You can almost tell at the end of the deal. You can pick out 3 or 4 teams and go, I guarantee one of these teams had somebody on the committee, and every year they do. And so it takes a strong bias, and they're supposed to step out of the room. They do step out of the room, but it doesn't go away. So, having said that, does Campbell play with a chip on their shoulder? Does Auburn play with a chip on their shoulder? I would have loved to have seen Auburn or Campbell as the 2 at Auburn too. If you're going to give Auburn the gift, well, here's the best 2 in the country. Have at it. and now go to work and let's see what happens, especially in that park because I think Campbell would be fit to play at Plainsman there in Auburn. But I know you guys went through bracket by bracket, made your picks, looked at everything that was going to happen. Give me did you have a 3 or a 4 seed rolling through? Did you have a surprise in any bracket that you can remember?
I had 4 seed Wright State winning at Indiana State,
Winning the whole thing?
winning the whole thing.
Nice.
Their coach Sogard, I played with him in college. They go to regionals every year, and I know you got Carolina there.
They're stay on the right state for a second. They're the 4 seed nobody wants to see because they're the 4 seed that's been in a regional. Remember, Tennessee hit the grand slam in the ninth or 10th. I think it was the ninth to knock them out 2 years ago before they made their trip to the World Series. Nobody wants to see Wright State as their 4 because that's a strong for the RPI. We talk about how the RPI can be misrepresented. Their RPI is not right. They're much better, and I don't even know what it is, but they're much better than their RPI because they're not a 4 seed.
Yeah, and Sogard takes those guys, and they seems like they go to Arkansas, Oklahoma State, or Kentucky every year, and their conference hurts their RPI, but he's doing a good job up there, and the guys before him did a great job up there. That's been a program
Well,
that's been there
Lovelady,
for
who
a
just got
while,
fired
wasn't
at Central Florida, was yeah.
it? Yeah, so
The hammer can drop quick.
it can, and uh, that'll be an interesting regional for me. And then, Clemson with their run late, winning the ACC tournament, and having Tennessee as their 2, just that feels a little off for me because I mean we all know Tennessee's is super talented team, and to have them coming as a 2, that's your 4 overall national seed, and you get those guys. That's I question that a little bit.
Yeah, I thought the 3 seed there with Charlotte being the 3 seed and as offensive as Charlotte has been, Tennessee's going to have to throw Dolander. I would think they're not going to be able to slough off. So, Clemson doesn't. They've got depth on the mound. They got a bunch of guys that can get outs. I don't know if they have one shutdown guy. They just go, this is the dude. Roll him out there. We'll see in the 8th inning. But it gives Clemson the chance maybe to throw their 2 or their 3 in game 1 and then roll back with their 1 in game 2. I don't know that Tennessee has that choice. To be able to win both games, I think Tennessee has to throw their ace against Charlotte. Otherwise, they're going to get bullpen depleted going into games 2 and 3.
Yeah, that'll be that park plays the Charlotte's offense. That's a hitter's
Yeah.
park there. That'll be interesting. And I think, we talked about Coastal earlier. I think the South Carolina regional's wide open. South Carolina struggled some down the stretch. Campbell's rolling, and NC State can get hot for a weekend. So to me, that one's wide open.
In that park, since Coach Tanner left, and Holbrook had a little bit, it doesn't have the home field advantage it had when South Carolina was making their runs as national side. We went down there in '07 and we lost the regional championship game, and a lot of it had to do with the crowd. We had a 5-hour rain delay. They had a chance to go to their parking lot and partake in some beverages, and they came back in, and it was a different environment. You felt like you were on the verge of a riot if things didn't go their way. I mean, you were on edge that much. That was the old ballpark. The new ballpark, and it's almost turned into, if you can get ahead of them, their crowd will turn against them so quickly that it will hurt them playing. And we saw that happen a couple of years ago in a regional. So I think I don't think there's a huge home field advantage there. I think the park plays to NC State and to Campbell's strengths. And then is South Carolina going to get healthy? I know they're missing they're missing their shortstop going into the end of the year. If they're not healthy, that'll be interesting. I think the other thing to watch is how does the pitching set up? What does Campbell do with Kuehler? They're 1. Do they hold him and maybe throw him in game 2? And no, because they've got depth. They've got enough arms. They can match up. Their 2 is going to be fine against State. State's still going to score runs, but Campbell can score with them because I don't know that NC State has a guy you just run out there and go, this is the shutdown guy. Here he is. Let's roll behind him.
Campbell and NC State did not play midweek this year, so it'll be their first time facing off, which I think makes that a little more interesting. You mentioned the '07 regional. We were both in that one. I think weather affected that a little bit. The old ballpark, I felt like, had the college campus feel. We're here to party. We're going to have a good time. The new park, so maybe a little more corporate, and
Right.
and it's not as home field advantage for South Carolina, but that one will be a fun one to watch around all our scout days this weekend.
Yeah, so I'm looking through it. My heart wants to pick Wilmington. I don't like the draw they got at Coastal, but my heart wants to pick them. I think a lot of it will depend on how Conway's playing day to day. Can Wilmington, on a day they need it to play small, will the park play small? On the day they need to play big, will the park play big? And it can shift down there in a couple of hours. And we've seen that happen before. There can be a huge difference between the 2 o'clock game and the 7 o'clock game, just because the sun sets and the you get a little bit of a shift off the ocean with the tides, and all of a sudden that ballpark becomes just huge. And so I think that'll play into it. But for the most part, I like a lot of the higher seeds, and I know I'm stepping out on a dangerous ledge right there, and oh my gosh, what's he even saying? It's just I thought the top end of college baseball this year was much 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 better than the middle half, and so I'm sure we're going to have an upset somewhere. We're going to have a team, win a game they're not supposed to, and then all of a sudden they're in the seventh in the championship game and they're up one. They go to their closer and the guys just dynamite that night, and boom, we got a 4 seed rolling through. But I'm not going to be. I don't see one standing out, and I go, that one's dangerous, because I like a lot of the 1s and 2 seeds.
Yeah, two things right here. You talked just on it earlier. The NCAA factoring in travel costs with regionals. UNC Wilmington never gets to go to an Indiana State and
Right.
be the 3 seed there to have a chance to compete. You
Right.
wonder what would happen if they get that draw at times. And then ECU 45 win club. How do you feel about them at UVA?
Well, they're two programs that are run very similar. They know each other fairly well. I want to say they're one of the clubs that scrimmage each other in the fall, because I know Coach Mack, the hitting guy at Virginia, obviously coached at East Carolina when Cliff was playing there. So those guys are tight. Um, Virginia's arms are really good. I mean, there's depth. We saw them in the ACC tournament, and they lost to Chapel Hill. They gave up some runs there, but I mean, it was just arm after arm after arm, and I think they were really setting themselves up. They knew they were going to be hosting. Let's get ourselves in the right positions. We don't want to spend anybody. And then offensively, they're guys in the middle of the order: the catcher Teal, and the third baseman who went with us to future games back when we were Mid Atlantic. I cannot remember. Those two guys have to go. Those two guys pace that offense. I think East Carolina has a little bit more depth because they have a couple different leadoff type guys in the order, with Barini, who's the outfielder that lit up state games 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Um,
Uh, Jenkins Cowart,
no, the leadoff. Yeah, I think he's hitting leadoff for him.
Hoover.
Left, yeah, Hoover.
Hoover's been there like 12 years. Lane
Yeah, it
Hoover
seems like
feels
it.
like.
But they've got always got those types of guys, and they've got like 3 of them in the lineup, and they space them. And so, no matter what's going on in the game, you have an at bat coming up that's going to pressure kind of what's happening to your pitching staff and to your defense. You're going to have to play. You're going to have to defend all 400 feet, home home field to center field. So I think that one's an interesting. Who's the reason? There was a reason I didn't like East Carolina coming out there. Who's the 3 seed there? Do you have it pulled up?
Yes. Charlottesville. Oklahoma is the 3 there.
That's why I didn't like it. I think Oklahoma gets a reprieve. I think they're a good club. Obviously, played for the national title last year, but that you've probably been through this. I know we went through it a couple times. There's just a sense of that brick coming off of your back once you're in the tournament. We've got to do this. We're not playing well. We have to. That there's no sense in freedom of playing because we're struggling and kind of climbing uphill to get into the tournament. And then all of a sudden you get in and everybody relaxes. The year was okay. And then boom, you win a game, and now you go, well, why not us? Why can't we beat Virginia today? We played for the national title last year. Roll it out there. Let's see what happens. And there's just that freedom that goes with clubs like that. We've seen them, and it's interesting. I think '07 was, and you mentioned it, the South Carolina region was South Carolina, Charlotte, State, Wofford. This year it's South Carolina, Campbell, who's similar to our club at Charlotte that year. We were top 20 club. They were a little bit more of a hosting chance than we were, but we were in the mix. We end up as a 2. State gets the 3. State's not, probably realistically could have been a 2. And then you look at the 4 and go, okay, it's not it's Wofford's good, but that wasn't a 4 that scared anybody that year. And the same thing this year. I think the very next year in '08 was the Virginia, App State, Oklahoma, and then a throwaway 4, maybe Army. And I think that's Army's back there this year, right?
Yep.
I think
Yeah,
Army's
those are
Army's interesting too because Virginia's gonna have to pitch well on day one because Army's gonna keep their offense at bay for a little bit and that choke factor it may get a little tight in the 6th and 7th if Virginia's pitching gives up some runs early. So it's an interesting regional. I'm excited for Friday to be here so I can have it on my TV. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to watch everything I need to watch this weekend. So I know we got scout days. We got regionals. Is MPI this weekend or next weekend?
I think it's next weekend.
Next weekend. So there's one less thing I have to figure out how to put on my TV. But, a lot of things going on that'll be exciting for us. So let's transition. Well, obviously, we'll be able to come back to this and talk a little bit more about the regionals and hopefully a bunch of North Carolina players moving through to the Supers. But we had a scout day last week at Mountain Island Charter up in the Mooresville, Lake Norman area. Kind of an up-and-coming program, still young, don't have a 17U team. I think they've kind of built grassroots. This group was 12U and kind of stayed together. They've kind of aged in that 15U area now. They've got some stronger teams behind them. But Regulators Baseball, Matt, it was a good day. Mount Island Charter, obviously, it's a gorgeous facility, all turf. They've dumped some money in there, and it plays pretty true. What did we learn from the Regulators Scout Day? And is there any players that kind of stuck out to you as you're going back through and starting to post this information to prepbaseballreport.com?
Good day with Mountain Island. I think every kid there was their first time going through a PBR workout. I thought they handled it well for the first time. They had a comfort level to them. The kids interacted. Thought it was a good day. A couple guys that popped for me. Brandon Washington. He had the top exit velo on the day at like 93 mile an hour. Hit some balls hard. Evan Hogg, lanky kid, looks like he's got a lot of growth ahead. Had a good day. Luke Kivett, stocky left-handed hitter. Good BP, drove the ball the other way. And Logan Featherstone, athletic kid. I thought he threw well on the mound too. Good BP. I think his numbers would jump once that body adds some strength and matures a little bit.
Yeah, he's a thin, young 25. The first 3 guys you mentioned are all 26s. Washington ran a 4:09:30. Their 60 yards weren't ready yet. You could watch them running, and from the 30 to the 60-yard marker, there was just some maturity and some strength levels that weren't there yet. And so, but looking at them run their 10 and their 30, there were some guys that moved okay. Washington was in that. Hogg or Ho ran a 4:12. Jeremiah Golden was another one that stood out for me. It's raw, but physicality. And when he centered the ball in the barrel, the ball jumped. He had a lot of balls. He looked like he found the barrel, but he was really thin through contact. But it'll be interesting to see how he kind of progresses as he sees more and more upper level pitching and can be a little bit more direct to the ball and trust some of his strength. But again, I think you make a great point. A lot of these guys, it was their first time going through something like this, and watching guys come out, even out of the cage, and they're kind of self-evaluating, and they're wanting to put on a show. And just what we really want to see is we want to see who they are. We don't necessarily need to see balls fly over the fence, especially if that's not your game. If your game is backspin line drives, give me 14 of those, and let me evaluate the swing off that. And I thought their second round throughout the entire group, there was a significant improvement as guys kind of got used to us being there, used to the BP thrower, which was their coach. They see him all the time, but I think even their coaches were a little bit dialed up. Just the excitement of kind of putting their guys out there and letting people see here's what's coming. It's almost like a parent watching their kid play. They want them to do so well. The coaches that were helping were still dialed up a little bit too.
Yeah, they were, and it was an exciting day for all of us, and really, really pleased with how their kids handled everything for the first time.
Yeah, on the bump, you mentioned Washington at 26 was up to 82. Featherstone at 25 was 78, 79. Strike thrower with some feel for spinning it. Tellus Bumgardner's a 27 that was up to 76. Tellus is kind of an intriguing frame, 6 foot 145. Looks like he's all arms and legs. But it was definitely intriguing. And we're still diving into some of these numbers, especially with the younger guys. When we're looking at these numbers, it's easy to go velocity and go, okay, I like that guy. But we're looking at arm path, we're looking at direction, we're looking at athleticism, we're looking at quickness. There's guys that had arm speed that they're just not strong enough to translate that just yet into velocity. But as the strength comes, that's gonna it's gonna pop, and so we're gonna see some of these guys. I think, you and I try to put grades on guys as even we're just watching for a first time just to get a feel. I put too young next to about four guys. Just need to come back and see him, in the next 6 months, so I can put a grade on him. And the reason I do that is because I think the grade's going to be pretty good, but I'm scared to put a really good grade on a guy right now throwing 75, 76. Does that make sense?
Yeah, last thing we want to do is grade too high and throw them in the rankings, and the maturation process happen late, and then those guys have to fall, just because of delayed process there. So probably, lean a little light early, and then let it jump when that body matures.
Yeah, 25s, 26s, and 27s at that event. So if you're, looking to kind of get a jump on some younger players, this may be a group you can kind of look at if you're a coach, or just kind of trying to get ahead on what's going to be coming through the state. And for us, I think some of the 27s are guys we're going to be looking at for junior future games. We put together Team Carolina and head down to Lake Point and take on the country, that last week in July.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a exciting time, and always interesting to see those young kids down there go and compete against other states, and after a long summer for those guys, and let them get their feet wet with competing down there in a great event.
Absolutely. Well, more from the regulators will be posted here in the coming 5, 6, 7 days. We'll have a bunch of stuff rolling out on the social media. I know we've already got stat story up. I know Matt's already posted today some quick hitters on some of the offensive guys that stood out. I'll have the quick hitters on the pitchers up on Thursday, probably before this podcast drops, and we'll continue with information into next week. But as we transition now, Matt, let's dive into maybe the most important topic that we've got. Something that's kind of driving, and I think it's one of those things that can get lost in the news right now because we do have the College World Series opening up. We do have exams for high school students, but there are 8 teams still playing high school baseball, and they're going to be in Burlington or Holly Springs this weekend. Friday and Saturday. Friday, single game for everybody. Potential doubleheader if you get to a game 3 on Saturday. State championships for the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. Let's start with the 4A, Matt. Talk a little bit about Wake Forest and that East Regional Championship Series with Corinth Holders, where they won Game 3 9-4. After losing Game 1, they won Game 2 3-1. What did you take away from the Cougars on that series?
I think their overall talent shined through that series. They dropped Game 1 against Corinth and Briggs McKenzie. Have to go on the road for Game 2 in a tough environment at Corinth, and a really tight game there. Cooper Allen tossed the gym. They get out with a win there, and then a game that should have been Saturday with the weather coming in got bumped up to Friday, and they come out. I believe got a couple 3-run home runs from Kyle Brazo and Stephen Crater, and jumped to an early lead and kind of just coasted from there. I know Corinth put together a little rally there, I believe, in the 7th, but just too much too early from Wake Forest for Corinth to bounce back.
You talked about the talent shining through. Carson Kreider threw in Game 1 as a freshman. He's committed to Iowa, a player that we've liked since we saw him in the 7th or 8th grade. And in Game 1, he didn't get an out. I think he walked 3. The game had started to get away from the Cougars a little bit, but, you're still wanting a strong outing from a freshman there so we can come back to him. He's got a little confidence. They don't get it, and they still got to come back to him in Game 3, and he goes out there and retires the first 6 guys he faces and sets a tone very early. We're going to be in this game. We're going to have a chance. offense, take your time. You got some time to get it going, but once you get it going, drop the hammer on them, and they did. And Carson pitches 6 strong innings, 2 hits. He did walk 4. He punched 3. He made some big pitches in some situations to get out of innings and kind of keep that 0 on the board. And then another freshman, guy that we took the the junior future games last year, Stephen Crater, big 3-run home run. And again, you're starting to get down in the order there, and you're still facing a Wake Forest commit, but you're going, okay, it's a freshman, but who are you going to pitch to? You don't want to pitch to Stevenson. You don't want to pitch to Allen. You don't want to pitch to Diaz. At some point, you've got to pitch to somebody, and Crater made them pay.
Yes, he did. He was in it and at Lake Point with us last year with the JFG, performed well down there and had a good series for Wake Forest. And you mentioned it there, Kreider getting his feet wet in Game 1. I think eased the pressure for him a little bit going there in Game 3, and he come out and put together an impressive performance for a freshman.
Wake Forest is going to get TC Roberson to decide the 4A championship. Roberson, an exciting 3-game series. Game 1 went to Roberson in 9 innings, 3-2. Game 2 goes to Northwest Guilford 3-1, and then Game 3, TC Roberson on the were they on the road?
They were at home.
They were at home. I have it backwards on my sheet. Roberson at home wins 9-8 in Game 3. What are the Cougars going to see here out of Roberson?
They can mix and match on the mound. They use several guys throughout that series, and I know their game got pushed to Friday too. And they had it lined up where their Game 1 starter, Micah Simpson, could have threw again on Saturday. Right. Gets pushed up to Friday, so you got to go in a different direction. But they got a grand slam from Reno Jeter early lead, and then Northwest match with a grand slam of their own from I believe it was Jackson Gottfried. And with 2 outs in the 6th, Micah Simpson hit a solo shot. He had the walk-off home run in Game 1. Go-ahead home run there in Game 3. And saw some video when Nick Parham come in and he punched out 2 or 3 there in the last inning. Then you see fireworks going off in center field to celebrate the regional final championship. And TC's been there before. I know they're looking forward to the matchup with Wake Forest this weekend.
It's tough to go up the mountain, and Northwest, I think, learned that. You lose really 2 games that you're right there and you have a chance to win, and they battle back. Great year from the Vikings, and for Roberson, you really just can't say enough about their ability just to trust the process and trust the game. If we have to win 1-0, we can. If we have to win 15-14, we can. Wake Forest has shown they haven't needed to, but they've shown glimpses of being able to do that. I think TC Roberson's going to be able to pressure Wake Forest and force them to do some things maybe they haven't done all year. Can you really control this? Can you really defend this? Can you really, if we attack this guy and we pitch around this guy, can you still score runs? There's going to be a good plan from the Rams, and they're going to put Wake Forest on the defensive at some point in that series and force Wake Forest to do what the Vikings really did and come back and take that big blow in the first inning, take that big blow in the second inning, and then throw your own big blow in the third. It's a shame, as good as that series was, really both series, that anybody has to be eliminated. But I'm really looking forward to the 4A games, and I think they are playing in Burlington this weekend. Is that correct? Do you know?
They are in Burlington this weekend.
Okay. The 3A series is going to feature J.H. Rose, who actually just, a 5-4 win in Game 1, a 7-0 win in Game 2 over Southern Lee. Maybe one of the most consistent teams in the state the entire year, and they're going to get West Henderson. West Henderson kind of survived Oak Grove. We'll say that. Oak Grove won Game 1 5-2. West threw Truett Manual in Game 2 and won 2-1. And then I think at that point, the depth of Oak Grove, especially on the bump, came through to light a little bit. West Henderson laid the wood to them 14-4 in 5 innings to capture the 3A West. What are you looking forward to in the 3A state championship series?
To me, it's going to be really interesting to see if West Henderson throws Truett Game 1 or Game 2. He's kind of He's went game 2, game 4, and then, game 2 of the regional final series. Do they throw him game 1, try to win game 1, get the momentum, and hope they can close out game 2 and get it over quick? Because I think if that series goes 3 games, I think it favors J.H. Rose with all of their depth.
Right. Yeah, and Rose, it's not like you're avoiding an ace. Rose is going to throw Hugh Collins or Andrew Wallen in those first 2 games. And like you said, they have depth behind it. We've seen it some scout days already. So there's not going to be a drop off in terms of stuff. Maybe pitch ability, maybe game control. It's just a matter, and I think it's a great point. How does Truett Manuel affect this series? Can you close him in game 1, potentially close him in game 2, and start him in game 3 if you have to? And I think that may be something they look into doing because that maximizes maybe his effect on the game as you put him in more high leverage situations. If they lose game 1 and he doesn't throw, he's going to throw game 2. We're not going to lose with him on the bench and not on the bench, but watching what's happening. But I think West, and again, we've talked about this going back 6, 7, 10, 12 weeks, it seems like, of their coaching staff had a plan of developing depth and still having Truett can kind of get us out of some issues. And I think that ability in February, March, and April and what they did has put this team into a position where they trust a lot of guys on the bump. And so when they do roll into game 3 and they do roll Stanko out there and he goes 4 innings, 7 hits, 4 runs, 3 earned, 4 Ks and no walks. Well, now we can just roll to the next guy, Grant Putnam, and roll the next guy and roll the next guy and roll the next. And we don't have to sit and trust on Truett to get every big out for us because there's some guys now that have done that.
Yeah, they've got contributions up and down the lineup. I go to game 3 of the series with Oak Grove and, hitting up and down the lineup, jumping through the early lead. And they'll definitely need that against Rose. Another thing with these state championship series is, they've been playing in high school parks. And
Right.
a lot of times maybe they favor the long ball. And then you go into Burlington, which is old pro park, big in the alleys, big to center. Does that change an offensive approach for a club or favor one team over the other?
And Ting will be the same way in Holly Springs. I mean, it'll play big at times. Very rarely does it play like a high school park. So there's going to be several balls hit at some point during this weekend where the dugout jumps out in front and the ball lands 30 feet away from the fence. And you're going, man, that ball's gone at our place, and probably is, but you're not at your place now. And so I think that's a good thing, though, when you're looking at the pitching staffs being stretched to 3 games in 2 days, especially for high school guys. Again, there's a lot of things I don't like about the system of our championships series. This is one of them. At no point during the year have any of these teams played 3 games in 2 days. But to decide our trophy, that's the setup. But
Yep.
you roll with it, and I think the bigger park has a chance to keep some of these games under control, especially if you're athletic in the outfield, and that could be a big factor. We could look up and go, man, the athleticism in the outfield of this team really, really held that game in check. They got a couple of extra outs. They cut a couple of doubles down to singles. They cut a couple of triples down to doubles. There were a couple of home runs that turned into outs. Whatever it is, the size of the park could play into this. So
One thing the West has going for them is they did put West and TC at the same site. They're very close to each other. So do you get some holdover crowd from those games pulling for the West, and does that factor into anything?
Well, I think both programs have played into that. Look at their social media that they've both been, hey, it's us against the world. It's the mountain versus the world. Come on up the mountain. You can't. It's tough coming up here and winning. Let's come find out. We're going to go down there, and we're going down there as a community. So I think there's no doubt that, especially as you get close to the end of a game, start of the next, and the game's close, that group that comes in, they may work with parents that have players playing on the other team. You're going to see some of that, and I think that could create an advantage or at least a little swell to push somebody through at some point. I think it's a great point. The 2A and 1A are going to be played at Holly Springs. The 2A is going to feature South Granville and Burns. South Granville is not a club we've talked a whole lot about this year. They rolled through their conference play. They put up a good record. They handled Camden County in 3 games. They showed an ability. They threw a shutout in game 3, which I thought was extremely impressive with Brendan Chamberlain. And Burns, they've got depth on the mound, may not have a true shutdown number 1, but that offense has a chance to light you up every single day of the week. Your early thoughts as we're looking at Burns and South Granville in Holly Springs?
Thing that jumps for me, South Granville lost a 9-inning game in game 1, come back and win 2 games. And then Burns, seems like all Burns does is win. Took care of Moorhead in 2 games, beat Anderson Nance. I think it's 2 teams that are very confident going into that series. And, for me, it's hard not to like Burns with, kind of, prove themselves all year and just keep doing it. So be interesting there in Holly Springs.
In our 1A championship series, also being played at Holly Springs, was decided on Monday. Northmore goes on the road. All 3 games, the road team won in this series. Northmore beating Voyager Academy 6-5 in game 3. They're going to face off with URE Charter, who, a little bit like Burns, scored kind of a knockout punch early after a 1-run game in game 1 and rolled to a 2-0 sweep in the 1A West. So URE Charter, Northmore. I know we haven't seen Northmore. It's not a club that we've talked about a whole lot, but it's a team that's played very, very well here in the tournament. And URE Charter, a team that's kind of been on our radar here for the past month to 6 weeks. What are your thoughts? Quick thoughts on the 1A?
I like the pitching depth of URE Charter. It seems like they've got consistent pitching throughout much of the tournament. Variety of guys they can go to, and I believe they've been there before. I think they'll feel good rolling in there, and hard not to like them in that 1A series.
We're going to have coverage throughout, trying to work it on Friday and Saturday. Obviously, we're out and about. We've got a bunch of stuff going on this weekend, but come Monday, we'll have reports out on every single game that was played, all the key moments, all the key stats, naming 4 champions ideally by the end of Saturday. So, and you can see all of that. Follow us along on Twitter at PrepBaseballNC, Instagram at PrepBaseballNC, and Facebook at PrepBaseballNC. We'll have all those links rolling through the social media, but you can always just go directly to prepbaseballreport.com and find all that action there too. As we finish up here, Matt, is there anything that anything that comes to mind in terms of the 4 championship games and an overarching idea of what could decide a championship or 2 as we're looking from outside in?
The playoff schedule, they've played 2 games a week throughout the high school season. You play at least 2 games a week. They finish up on Friday night, got a full week off. So how do those guys handle a week without competition to roll in to play the biggest series of the year?
That's a good point. Very good point. So I'm excited to follow it all. I'm excited to follow the college regionals. Obviously, the scout days we have coming up. Follow along with us. If you're a fan of the podcast, make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you hit that like button, and that way you're getting alerts as to when we post these things again. And there's a ton of information coming out. We've already dropped rankings for the 24s, 25s, and 26s heading into the summer. Have not had a chance to talk about those. We will. As some of this information dies down, we're going to dive into some of the rankings, some of the players to watch for the summer, and also coming up, our players of the year for the state of North Carolina, our all-state team, and then the PBR All-American, the national player of the year. Those things are coming up here in the next couple of weeks. From Matt Payne, I'm Brandon Hall. This is the Prep Baseball Report of North Carolina podcast, and we'll see you at the field.